Welcome to the Birds and the Bees podcast. This is Braxton Dutson.
That's the key. People aren't talking about it.
Everybody needs to know that porn is not a documentary.
It's not like if we don't talk to kids about sex and sexuality, they're not going to hear about it. They're just not going to hear about it from us.
They have tons of questions, they just don't know how to ask them.
All you have to do is be one chapter ahead. You don't have to know everything. Just one chapter ahead of wherever your child is.
Today on the Birds and Bees podcast, I am not Braxton Dutson. I'm the anonymous author of And It Was Very Good, which is a clinically accurate sex manual written for members of faith communities, including Latter-day Saints. I'll be interviewing Braxton. Braxton will give his experience and his journey becoming a certified sex therapist. If you'd like a free copy of And It Was Very Good, you may email me at earthlyparents@gmail.com. And now, my interview with Braxton. All right, for those that don't know you, Braxton, can you tell me something about what you do and where you practice?
Yeah, so I'm a certified sex therapist, and I'm actually in Salt Lake City, Utah. And kind of things that make me tick, or the things that I really enjoy, is one part I really enjoy educating. I'm a presenter. I work at the Healing Group, which is a therapeutic place that people go to improve their livelihood, deal with distress in relationships, individual issues, and things along those lines. And I really enjoy being a part of the healing process. And so, I mean, one of the things that kind of got me started on this path is I grew up in Payson, Utah, which is about an hour south of Salt Lake, and grew up in the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints. Worked with people around me. I lived out a little bit on the west side on West Mountain, and really enjoyed what we did out there. There was a community. It was my friends were in my ward. The ward spanned for miles because we're so spread out, and I really enjoyed growing up there. What got me on this path, though, is that I had friends, I had family members, and I myself had experienced abuse growing up from different parties, not so much within my immediate family, but in different parties. And what I noticed is that is my siblings, my friends, and I myself worked through struggles through therapy, actually going in, meeting with a therapist, and working through the distress I was experiencing, that I started to get better. I started feeling better. I started feeling more confident and working it towards what I want to do. And I said, you know what? I want to be a part of that process. I really, really enjoy seeing people heal, have them own their own experiences. And as I was going down that road to work with individuals in sexual abuse as well as domestic violence, I decided that I was going to do that. And I actually ended up taking a class in human sexuality, found out that I just fell in love with the topic. I realized just how much sexual education I did not get, even though my mother and father were pretty open with me about sexual health, mostly my mother. And as I was continuing to learn, I was like, wow, my community, the LDS community, really needs and has a desire to talk about this. And so that's kind of how I got into becoming a sex therapist and seeking certification and going through the education process to work in this field.
If you talked about abuse, sexual abuse?
Mm-hmm. Yes. I'm
sorry, and if this is not something that is on the table to talk about, I certainly understand. Do you think you're a better sex therapist because of that?
I would say that I'm a better sex therapist for going through therapy. So experiencing something specific, mine was specifically sex abuse, and there was some emotional abuse that went on when it came to church settings. But going through therapy to address those, yes, I would say that doing my own work helped me to become a better sex therapist and therapist in general. I believe that any therapist needs to go do their work, whether they've had big T trauma, which is, if you've gone through something extremely traumatic or something that, we would say, oh, you get PTSD symptoms from going to war or having a sexual abuse or being raped or going through a very serious life-threatening experience. Or even if it's little t, you experience something that was traumatic for you and was difficult and affected your life in such a way that I think any type of therapy really makes a therapist better.
Did you want to be a healer in earlier life, or was this the first time that you had felt healing, and so then healing as a general idea became attractive, or maybe even like feeling like a calling?
That's a really good question. I'm trying to think of when I first started feeling that way, because I would say that beforehand I was growing up, my parents would describe me as a peacemaker. I guess maybe except for when I was in my teen years, I definitely teased a lot more than needed. But I definitely was one to kind of bring people together. So that was a part of it. I would also say that that in going through therapy, I would definitely say that the drive to be a healer and support someone in their process continued to grow as I got older.
Not everybody that chooses to be a sex therapist or even a therapist has a podcast talking about sexuality openly. Talk about that.
No. So I wanted to. So one of my favorite things, I have to tell you, one of my favorite things is being behind the mic. Doing what we're doing right now is one of my favorite things to do. In college, well, I guess even before then, I realized that I really enjoyed being heard and being this. I liked being kind of, if you'd say, the class clown, but also just I liked being funny. I liked people acknowledging me, and I found that I was really good at being that way in front of people. And in college, I ended up doing a radio show. I was B-Rax on the tracks that played 80s rock and roll and read stupid people in the news. And I really enjoyed doing that. I did that for a number of years just at the college level. And once I got my master's level of social work and really the work started hitting heavy, I had to give that up. And I thought, you know what, I really wish in another life I would be a radio personality. That was just way too much fun. And as time went on, I was listening to podcasts, and I noticed that there was a lot of therapists that were giving wonderful information, very needed information to me as a therapist and as to the community, but their sound was off. I remember listening to one where I had to turn up the volume when the interviewee was being interviewed, when they were speaking, and then I'd have to anticipate when the therapist would talk and turn it down because they would come through and distort and blow your ears out. And I was like, I've had enough training in editing that I could do this. So I did a little bit of research and looked into what my passions were, and I kept getting questions as a therapist about how do I talk to my kids about sexual health? Really, like, when do I start? How do I start? How do you talk about this topic? And I said, you know what, with these questions, I should just take the questions people ask me and really help parents build their intimacy together, and in turn, then turn around and feel empowered to talk to their kids about sexual health, so that we can start making this broad change. So I got equipment and I started into it and got behind the mic interviewing other sex therapists in their profession, and it kind of continued on from there. And there was Birds and Bees podcast was formed.
So you said empowerment.
Mm-hmm.
Empowering what? Empowering
the ability to act. A lot of parents have a hard time feeling as though that they know enough. And when they don't feel they know enough, they don't act. And sometimes when parents feel they do know, but they're embarrassed or they don't exactly know how to act on the knowledge that they have, they choose not to act. And so my goal is to empower parents through education and through methods of talking to your kids about sexual health. It can be uncomfortable, it can be difficult, and sometimes kids ask questions that we really don't know. And I wanted there to be a safe place, a safe haven for them to be able to go, you know what, I don't know about this so much, but I'm going to listen to this episode and walk away with a couple of tips or tricks that I can use to continue these conversations with my kids. And that's, to me, what's the empowerment that I wanted to have parents feel and experience.
Is it that you want the parents to give the information that they have, or are you, and I suspect you are also trying to give them the information they don't have?
Yes.
And push them in a way that might be helpful to them.
Mm-hmm. I would say being able to do both. If a parent is nervous about having the conversation, it can be there, but mostly, I would say most parents don't have the information, feel that they don't have enough information, and shy away from it. So it is a two-part. Give the accurate sexual health information and support them in acting on the knowledge that they have through conversations with their children.
This is another personal question, and forgive me if it is too personal. Mm-hmm. Did you feel that you had a calling, like God asked you to do this?
I would say yeah. Yeah, that even as we're talking right now, I can totally feel the Spirit come over me in a sense of there was the Birds and Bees podcast was one of them, but I would say being a sex therapist was probably where I had the biggest calling from God. I remember sitting in class, I believe it was the first, maybe the second day of the sexual health or human sexuality class. And I was sitting in class, the topic was coming up, and I remember just feeling I felt so good inside. And I'm saying the word good because I'm lacking the words on what that experience was for me. I remember asking myself, okay, what's going on here? We're talking about sex. Maybe I'm just so enthralled with the topic of sex. Does that make me weird? I don't know. And I was like, nah, that's not this feeling. And then I thought, you know what? Maybe it's just, what else could be going on here? And I remember hearing my professor then, Kristen Hodson, she was talking about the complexity of sexual health and that you could become a sex therapist. And I, again, got the chills, felt the Spirit in a way that was like, whoa, I need to look into that. And it was kind of I was pointed in that direction for sure. And so in that way, through the complete, this is me, and this is what I am here to do, and this is what I need to continue seeking after, I would say yes, that definitely came as a calling to me.
Now that you've done it, how many years have you done it? I don't know how long you've been a sex therapist or a podcaster, to be honest.
Yeah. So when it comes to therapy, I've been doing therapy, practicing in therapy since, has it been 2014? I want to say it was 2014 when I started. And then to become a certified sex therapist, I started practicing sex therapy in 2016. I started practicing in sex therapy under supervision. Started working towards my certification, and this isn't just a weekend certification. It really ought to be a license, in all honesty. It costs as much as another degree. It was just as much as my master's degree, and it was all on my own. I flew across the country to Mexico to different seminars, learning from the top sex therapists across the nation. And even internationally too, we had people come from Britain and other places to teach us. From that, I've been practicing that since 2016, and my full certification. I completed my full certification April of 2018. So I'm working on almost 2 years as a certified sex therapist, but practicing sex therapy for almost 4 years.
How has it changed now that you've been in practice longer? Are there things that you, either for the people that you talk to, or I think more specifically also for members of the Church of Jesus Christ or Latter-day Saints, that you feel differently now than you did at the beginning?
I think one of them is my comfortability. Obviously, we have to, in order to become a certified sex therapist, a part of that is exploring what things come up for you. So growing up in Payson, Utah, sex wasn't really talked about at all. And so I had to look at the different things that made me feel uncomfortable or that made me have to work through I had to work through my stuff in being a sex therapist so that I can really sit with a couple when they are in my office talking about betrayal, or in my office talking about and exploring what their sexual health looks like. What do we really want to do? How does this look like for us? And I think what I've seen the most, so my change has been important and consistent throughout those years. I'd say for individuals that come in to see me and couples that come in to see me, probably some of the biggest changes have been around President Nelson and the different changes that have been going on in the church, different outlooks on the LGBTQ community. I do see a lot of individuals that come in expressing acceptance, others that come in expressing even more. This is something that is showing us the last days. So I'm seeing more of a divide as time goes on in between revelation and how people feel and what it looks like when it comes to sex specifically. I've also seen a lot of transitioning families. It's not even transitioning families, but relationships where one person may be more into the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints, where one may be exiting or is not so much true believing. And I've seen an increase in that over the past few years as well, that there's a lot of middle ground that people are trying to work through. And I work with a lot of couples that are trying to identify how can we build intimacy, connection, while my partner is not so sure about the church or is leaving the church or has left the church and I still want to be in it. So I work a lot with couples like that.
If you had things that you could teach and just say, this is what you should know, and this is maybe how you should think differently to any of us as members, do you have like a hit list of things that you'd say?
Oh, yeah. Yeah, I definitely do. And these are very controversial topics that come up. But one of the first ones I think that I would hit is, or one of the first things that I would start to educate, and if I had a listening ear and someone was like, I really want to know, I would have members of the church specifically, and anybody, but as we're talking about members of the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints, I would say that masturbation is probably one of the first ones that I would tackle with couples, with individuals. There is so much pain that comes into my office because of masturbation. And what I mean by that is there is, from what we see and what continues to happen, is that it's not something that's taught. It's something that is innate. God gave this to us. We have masturbation. It shows up in kids. It shows up in the womb, and all the way through our years. And we've been told not to masturbate. We've been told not to do anything along those lines that goes back to the famous Packer talking of, or Elder Packer describing it as being a factory, and we don't want to start up the factory before it's supposed to be. And I would like to have members of the church understand that masturbation is a very natural part of the body. And if you are identifying with, I don't want that to be a part of my life, give yourself some understanding and compassion, knowing that this isn't the thing that is trying to take you away from God, that if you're trying and you continue to try to not, that especially if it starts getting towards suicidal thoughts or hurting yourself. I've had men come in reporting of cutting their penis, putting screws in their pants to try and avoid erections so that they would try and stop these thoughts, or if pain would be associated with erections and masturbation, then I wouldn't want to. And this is just such a normal part of life that masturbation can be something that supports a relationship. It can be a very great way to manage sexual drive, especially in a relationship where one person may be a higher drive person, may want to have sexual intercourse more often than the other person, and they may not want to have so much sexual intercourse. But we have this rhetoric and this topic about my partner is going to be in charge of my sexual drive, and I cannot achieve any type of, I can't have an orgasm, I can't experience sexual experiences without my partner. And therefore, it tends to put couples into an interesting situation, because if the only way to work through sexual drive is by having vaginal sex, then that puts one person in a place, or both people. One either has to really hold back, and that can create resentments, or one person has to really come forward, and it often can kill drive, because it just becomes a dutiful thing, which ultimately leads to both people feeling dissatisfied and frustrated. Where when a couple can come in and start identifying, this is what we want our relationship to look like, and when you want to experience, say, an orgasm, and I'm not in the mood, what options do we have? I would love to have members of the church start to explore what their options are, from being able to introduce masturbation or have masturbation if you're in the room, if they believe in having the coupleship together, being able to identify best practices for that relationship that increases connection with each other, and also leaves both people feeling honored and satisfied. But that would be probably the first one that I would go after. And I'm not sure if you want me to continue down the list, but I'd love to do a couple more if you'd like.
I'd love to do a couple more. Let me get one follow-up. Mm-hmm. Do you encourage people to pray about it, and or is that outside of your realm, and you have people look to church leaders or say nothing?
I do, depending on the person. It all depends on the person. Like if someone's coming in and they're saying, I'm atheist, or this is where my relationship is with religion, which is what I ask every time. I ask a history of someone's relationship with religion, with spirituality. That's a big deciphering decision that I have if I were to ask for them to pray or explore that with them. I never do it as homework, because that would make it more of what I think should happen. However, there's one couple I was working with that we were right in the middle of this. They were an elderly couple. They were somewhere around the age of their late 60s, early 70s. He was experiencing erectile dysfunction, wasn't able to maintain an erection, and they were both touching each other for physical intimacy. Well, both of them felt that they were sinning, and because of the masturbation thought process. Even though they were doing it together, they still felt that they were sinning, and they're like, I believe their quote was, if I were to die, like we're so close to ending this life, we're at the end of our lives, that if we're going to throw it all away just because we want to have a little bit of pleasure here and there, like it's totally not worth it to not make it the celestial kingdom. And I worked with them, kind of explored different options, and it really came down to, we don't know what we can and cannot do. Our bishop has said, don't worry about, you guys be able to do what you want to, but they were still feeling dirty about it. And the church doesn't have any, they haven't sent out any releases on this, on what couples should do. They say, let the couples decide. And so that was a time where we explored, well, how can we know? And essentially working with them to say, well, what would let you guys know the most? And they said, well, it's got to come from God. And that was when I asked that question of like, do you feel like it would be important to pray about this and find out? And they said, yeah, we're gonna pray about it. And after that week, I came back, asked how the prayers went. They said they had a couple of sessions of being able to pray, and they both felt good about it. They felt the Spirit saying it was okay and they were going to be just fine, and continued on with that. And I think that is just a very important part of exploring what's going to be great within your relationship. I think that's a great way to go about it.
As we talk about Latter-day Saint couples, those that do decide to try masturbation when they hadn't before, mm-hmm. What's the outcome? What do you see? For each of us in our own lives, as we listen to something like this, we only know what we've experienced or may experience. Yeah. And certainly in the case of masturbation, you feel some sense of anxiety that it might be habit forming. So if you were to make a choice, you might not be able to unmake that choice. Mm-hmm. So tell us what you see, because you've seen people make this choice.
Definitely.
What's been the outcomes?
What I find the most is that fear that you're talking about, the fear about moving into an out of control sexual behavior is what I hear the most. Is I'm worried that I'll be out of control and not be able to stop it because I've fired up the factory. And what I've seen is that when there is a feeling of out of control, feeling like you can't stop, usually there tends to be distress behind it. And so we start to go into what does it do for you and why? We're not just achieving orgasm. There's a good chance we're trying to cope or we're bored. And time again, if I throw out the 5, hungry, bored, tired, stressed, or experiencing another form of emotional distress, such as anxiety, depression, bipolar, something that may be more psychological. What I've recognized is we address the underlying symptoms. When we address the anxiety or the situation that masturbation puts out there or helps to resolve, that the masturbation feels a lot less compulsive or feels a lot less out of control. And so if you're worried about that, ask yourself and really explore why and when you feel like masturbating. What urges do you experience and when do your thoughts start to move you towards masturbating? Is there a certain time period? Is it when you're at your house alone? Is there certain times you start to feel really excited about masturbating before it happens? Like, find out if you're at work. I get this all the time with clients coming in saying, at work I find it the most, especially right before a board meeting or right before this, and I feel the urge and I run to the bathroom and masturbate. We tend to find that there's, some nervousness, some anxiety. And so if you can find what's going on underneath, there's a lot more of sometimes being turned on and wanting a sexual release is the reason. And you can explore that on your own, or with a therapist. I highly encourage, if you're really worried about introducing masturbation, that you can seek support from a sex therapist that's competent with the LDS community. So you don't necessarily have to, tell them all the reasons why you're nervous about starting to masturbate, but coming to see me, someone coming to see me would end up exploring what distress comes up, what teachings they've been told, what their parents said. There's a lot that goes into our sexual behaviors and sexual thoughts and desires that sometimes we've never looked at. So I encourage people to look at that when you start to incorporate this into your life. I've seen so much empowerment in a couple when they've said, you know what, I want to be able to feel my drive. They want to feel their drive, and I don't want to force anyone to do these things. And they introduce masturbation to a certain degree with planning and with intention, that they're able to feel more in control, as we're saying, about, well, I feel this way, and I can communicate that with my partner. I can approach them and say, hey, are you interested in a sexual experience? And they're like, no, not so much, but how about you go take some of my underwear, or remember those pictures that we had, or go think of me in the shower, or something, that they're both engaged in. You have a need, I have a need, and we're both being honored and respected. And that is just one method of being able to encourage and support couples and individuals, and going, hey, this is a part of my life, and where do I feel most comfortable? What is my best sexual health? What does that look like and mean for me?
When we talk about things that you wish that Latter-day Saint couples or people knew about sexuality or had perspectives on, that's one. Yes. Masturbation. What's next?
I think some of the other ones that I think of, I'm going to pull up one of my lists, wherever that may be.
You actually keep a list?
Yeah. There's a list of for members, but also for common questions that I tend to get that I look up or I want to do for podcasts, and or being able to write a book, such as one that has just come out by Earthly Parents. They do a great job in talking about introducing sexuality and sexual health in the LDS community, especially before you're getting married, or if you're being married as a virgin, or even if you haven't been, being able to introduce and achieve your best sexual self, and as a couple. And I really like how they explored all these different these different topics, and I also have different topics that I want to address and I keep addressing. So one of them that I think of is I would love to introduce lube. Lubrication, 2 points on lubrication. One of them is that it is not a failure on the female-bodied person to need lubrication or want lubrication, or even for the male at that fact. Having lubrication can enhance sex, especially on for your first time or any time after that. For matter of fact, having a lubrication that is body safe, which I mean, don't buy KY, don't buy Trojan. As much as they're very accessible, they can cause a lot of irritation. There's a lot of science behind it. But for the most part, if you get something like Uber Lube or Good Clean Love or Sliquid, those are 3 companies, or even here in Utah, there's one called Coco New, and they're body safe. They essentially do well in not creating UTIs, yeast infections, and vaginal discomfort. But it's not a thing to say that you're any less. It kind of goes along the same lines of vibrators. That doesn't make you less of a man. It doesn't make you less of a woman. It is like wearing glasses. You know, if you have to wear glasses, that doesn't make you less of a person because you wear glasses. It's to help enhance life. You're having some troubles with seeing. Even if you don't have troubles with seeing, glasses can also do many other things. So as vibrators get involved, it does not replace the human. A vibrator doesn't have warmth, touch, can't tell you that they love you, nothing along those lines. Vibrators can be introduced in an individual or couple's relationship to be able to enhance sexual experiences and give pleasure to both people. So that's one of them that's high up on the list. And the other one that I work with couples all the time is exploring what I call is the pleasure. Well, I guess I don't call it that. I'm trying to remember who calls it the pleasure wheel. But Al Vernacchio talks about. He's an educator in Philadelphia. He talks about instead of using the acronym or the analogy of baseball. You know, first base is getting a kiss, second base is this, and third base is that, and home is having vaginal sex. That if we can take it from that perspective of usually the male-bodied person is trying to advance the bases, trying to steal bases, and the field being played on is the woman that has to guard and try not to let the allowance happen. If we can think of it more of like making a pizza, how often do we talk about, hey, what do you want for dinner? I want pizza. Well, what do you want on your pizza? Oh my heavens. There's so many different choices, all the way from anchovies to the regular pepperoni and anything in between. And there's a communication that happens. What do you want? Well, what do you want tonight? Well, usually I like mushrooms, but I think I just want bacon and extra cheese. Wonderful. I really like that. That sounds like a great 2-topping pizza. Or, hey, let's go for the whole thing. Or let's just get a really simple one that's just cheese. Yeah, that sounds great to me. Or, I don't really like that. But there's a communication between people on finding out what you want on your pizza. If we could do that with sex, especially as Al talks about it, if we could do that with sexual drive and desire, where it's like, hey, what are you feeling tonight? Oh, usually I feel, a missionary position, but I kind of want to feel or do something like this. I'm not really feeling that tonight, but maybe if if I get a massage or you give me a massage, I might be able to get more in the mood. I'm not really into giving a massage tonight, but what about this or what about that? But we could start to explore. That's where masturbation can come involved and be like, oh, you interested in this? Yeah, I could do that. Sweet. And let's watch a movie after. It's a creation. It's a creation. And especially for LDS members, if we can think of this as a creating, not just for children, but creating intimacy and creating love, that there's a lot more to it than how fast can I get to penis vaginal penetration.
You're not just a podcaster and an author and a sex therapist. You are also a world record holder.
Yes.
Tell us about that.
Very much so. So I am currently the world record holder in the Guinness World Records books of chugging the most mustard from a bottle in 30 seconds. The current record is 30 ounces. So I did 30 and a half ounces in 30 seconds.
That is seriously the most disgusting thing we've talked about all day.
It's so true. It is extremely uncomfortable, extremely gross. It's gross.
You didn't do it solely because you like mustard, you can drink mustard, and because you can get a world record, all of which are, I assume, nice things to do.
Yes.
But you had a purpose to it also.
Yes. I'm always looking for ways to help people in a fun, encouraging way to talk to their kids about sexual health. I did this with a little, the word, playing on the word mustard. So what I invited people to do, especially parents, is to, quote, mustered up the courage to talk to your kids about sexual health. And so that's what I did. I drank a lot of mustard to help parents mustered up the courage to do something that can be uncomfortable, that can be unsure. I really didn't know if I could break the world record in chugging mustard, and working up to it, I practiced. I mean, I didn't just drink 30 ounces. To tell you the truth, up in preparation to that, I'm not kidding you, I probably drank 250 ounces of mustard in preparation to find out what was the best way, what worked best for my body, and how I was going to really break that record. And it is no different than talking to your kids about sexual health. If you aren't sure how to say the word penis without laughing, there's practice. Practice with a friend. Practice in the mirror. Say vulva. Say vagina. Be able to say these words. That's one part of the practice. Being able to say, it's important for me to talk about pornography with my 10-year-old because that's statistically when he's going to be exposed to it or when she's going to be exposed to it. But that's uncomfortable. That's okay. Ease into the uncomfortability. I eased into the uncomfortability of chugging a bunch of mustard and came out quite successful and still very uncomfortable and gross to do. But that was my goal, was to help parents go, you know what, if this guy can chug mustard and be really gross and uncomfortable, I can go and talk to my kids about sexual health and sit in some uncomfortability too for the better of my child.
Braxton, one of the other things that comes up often within members of the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints is a talk about one sexual topic. If there's one topic we talk about, it's a fairly negative one. That's pornography. Do you have anything there that can help members that you feel is scientifically evidence-based, not based in fear, not based in frank nonsense, but really gives people some help?
Yeah, so I came up with, I call it the 3 C's, especially when it comes to why kids look at pornography. Often we think, if you see pornography, you're a porn addict, you're a sex addict, and we jump to one end of the spectrum or the other. And that's not statistically true. That's not true at all, actually. It doesn't mean anything other than you've seen a sexually explicit image or video. So the 3 C's that I came up with, and then actually the 3 C's that how parents can respond, which is what Kristen Hodson was able to come up with. I'll talk about those in just a second too. But the 3 C's of why kids look at pornography are: first, clicking; second, curious; and third, coping. Now clicking is essentially they accidentally come across it. They watching a Pokemon video or something, and they stumble across a video or something that is more sexually explicit, just completely on accident. The other one is curious. Their kids are curious. They want to know what boobs look like. They want to know what the other gender looks like. They want to know what sex feels like, looks like, what it experiences, and so they search it. And come across. Google's very good at giving you exactly what you search for. So there's the curiosity piece there. And then there's coping, and we talked a little bit about this in masturbation, is that sometimes there's, especially for kids, you've got an older child that may have parents going through a divorce, they may be experiencing anxiety, depression, being bullied at school, feeling like an outcast, feeling stress about tests or trying to be perfect. There's a lot of stress involved in being a kid, let alone being an adult. But there's a good chance that they're coping with something. And so being able to explore and change the way that we approach the children, which is what Kristen Hodson talks about, is the 3 C's for parents to do is stay curious, stay connected, and stay calm. So staying calm is don't freak out whenever they come to you or find out that they've looked at a pornographic image. Staying curious is asking open-ended question versus, did you look at pornography? Yes or no. It's, what images did you see? Well, I saw, and they can fill in the blank, and you can understand more of what's going on. You can ask questions to find out what the 3 C's are. And then there's also staying connected. Your children are a lot more than just if you feel like they're being addicted to something, or they're a lot more than just the action of the moment. They are very multifaceted people, and so we want to stay connected with them. How do we talk to them and connect with them in other ways? If you show forth love first, which is actually on the LDS website, under the pornography thing, I think Elder Dallin H. Oaks talks about, so oftentimes we tend to want to pull back love first to try and encourage them to reach for the love, when in reality we need to show forth more love when someone needs it like this and is working through an issue such as pornography. And so being able to show them love, stay connected, stay curious, and staying calm, you can address and find out which one of the 3 C's they're going through and actively give your child the most support versus trying to lock down all their access to internet and things along those lines. And if you're curious about, if you want to get more into the 3 C's or how to address this with your kids, I offer an online webinar essentially, but an online course. It's not a webinar, it's an online course to walk you through the 3 C's, ways to talk to your kids about sexual health. And that's with the Healing Group to go. You can go to thehealinggroup.com and explore that, or be able to get that program. If you can't find it, or you're unsure, or you want to know more about it, you can email me at braxton@thehealinggroup.com. That's BRAXTON @thehealinggroup.com.
Braxton Dutson, thanks so much for joining me and telling me your story and how you got to be a sex therapist and the host of the Birds and Bees podcast.
Thank you so much for having me. I really enjoyed this. This has been another episode of the Birds and Bees podcast. Thank you for tuning in. If you have any questions about the show, comments, or questions you would like addressed in another episode, please give us a call at 385-449-1818. Leave your voicemail and your question, or you can also email us at birdsandbeespodcast@gmail.com, or visit us online at birdsandbeespodcast.com.